oil markets in Asia have opened this week up above the 130, up 1% or so. They're kind of still caught in a certain frame, but they seem to have sort of sticking to the upper end of the band that we've seen in recent weeks. Of course, another highlight this morning, Davos is back. I'm not sure if that's a good story or a bad story, but nonetheless, Davos is back. And the immediate headline that grabbed my attention this morning was the head of the IMF delivering a fairly stark warning that the global economy faces perhaps its biggest test since the Second World War. That comes on the back of last week's comment by the central bank governor of the United Kingdom, who described the outlook for food prices to be apocalyptic. So these are stacking up headlines, one on top of the other. And ultimately, one has to ask, have the financial markets priced in these outlooks that these world economic leaders are sharing with us, the world that they're seeing in our path ahead? Let's kick off this morning with Robin Mills, CEO of Kamar Energy. Robin, your opening thoughts on whether indeed the markets have adopted or have priced in these outlooks?
Yeah, well, I think so. Look, we've been in attention for the past couple of months, maybe, on the recovery of demand versus the China story. Now there seems to be some more comfort that the China lockdowns are over. I'm not sure that story is over by any means, but anyway, the relaxation in Shanghai seems to be taken into account now, and then generally the recovery of demand. So the market seems rather more relaxed, and of course, last week we had oil prices rebounding significantly, and they're up a bit today on generally positive news. So a more relaxed outlook, despite all of the clouds. China, the possibility of the resumed lockdown somewhere in China being one of them, but then also the clouds over inflation and what action at some point central banks may have to take over that.
Let's go to Lori Hitayen, sitting in Beirut, MENA Director of the Natural Resource Governance Institute. And I want to begin with the very local but relevant, perhaps it has some macro relevance. Lori, the outcome of the Lebanese elections, I know, are very special to you and the work that you've been doing there. I believe a big mabruk is in order. Maybe you can update us on what the outlook from the Lebanese elections feels like for you.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Personally, I'm very happy because for the past 2 years, besides my work and in parallel of my work on energy, I've been working to create or establish a new political party that is completely different in objectives, in views, and aspirations from the traditional parties. And today, I'm very proud to say that my party, Taqaddum, has 2 MPs in the parliament. So this is really an exciting news for us. Hopefully, our parliamentarians will be able to help the country to recover from the many challenges that we have. Generally, I think the change movement and the revolutionary movement, they've been able to have 13 MPs in the parliament, and that is a good start. People were thinking that maybe we will end up with 1 or 2 or 3 MPs. And therefore, the traditional parties would have think that means that the change movement and all the revolution that has happened since 2019, which was part of a cumulative, if you want, a continuous battle since 1990 for a change in the way the country is challenged, they would want to say that it doesn't exist. People are not into these kind of changes and demands. So today we see that people are with that change. And it showed in the elections. We are very happy with the results. It doesn't mean that we will be able to change everything in the country, but we're at the good start.
Can we draw any? Of course, there's challenges. The mountain is very high. You've just about maybe reached base camp, inshallah. But exactly. Can you draw any sort of regional ramifications? It would appear Hezbollah has not been as successful as they have been in the past. Is there any kind of connectivity to the region, the outcome of these elections, do you think?
Look, so in numbers, Hezbollah continues its domination over the constituency. And with Hezbollah and the Amal movement, these are like the two Shia political parties. They still continue representing the 27 MPs that they got. So for them, they believe that they still have control over at least their group of people. Their allies have weakened, and some completely went out of the parliament. That is a sign that there is a kind of change that is happening. We cannot say that Hezbollah is completely weakened, but this Hezbollah has gotten if you want, the signs that not everybody is happy with the direction the country is going. So what is happening on the other side today? We've heard that there was an assassination happening in Iran of one of the leaders of a military that is in charge of developing the weapons that basically go to Hezbollah. So I think that is maybe going to have implications. Let's see what the reaction will be. At the same time, we know that there is the JCPOA or whatever they're trying to do in Vienna, which I don't believe will end up in positive notes. So definitely these are things that today that we are following and to see, but we cannot say that Hezbollah is completely weakened in the country, but they know that they cannot continue the way they are continuing.
I'm getting messages in my ear that, as they used to say in the olden days, Houston, we have a problem. No, that Omar Najia is actually on the call this morning. I just can't see him, so I haven't called on him yet. Omar Najia, Global Head of Derivatives, is a voice in the ether. Omar, good morning. Oil markets up again, but not breaking out of this range. The expectation that you were sharing with us in recent weeks, that breakout yet to happen.
Yeah, it's basic, but I think it's basic.
I'm just seeing the visual for your icon, which is some kind of figure flying through the air with a little Star Wars man in his it just sort of struck me as being somewhat amusing.
Yeah, no, that's Mandalorian. It's been there forever, basically.
Oh, has it? I haven't noticed it before. Yeah.
Yeah, so look, the oil market, I think, is basically, like I've been saying, consolidating. And I just want, instead of trying to explain stuff, technically and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot of people watched, I don't know if you watched like Game of Thrones, right? So in that Game of Thrones, you have this whole kind of, few episodes where basically this guy keeps saying like, winter is coming, winter is coming. And everybody just goes on, on their business that, okay, well, I don't know what he's saying. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It always comes, blah, 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 blah. But the whole point about the oil market and what's going to happen is that you're going to have that winter is coming, as it always does. And you have a ginormous shortage of supply in Europe. You have basically fears that they can't meet demand. So you have the EU. So these pronouncements from the IMF and whoever it is at Davos freaking out and all that, and dark clouds. The important point to understand is this is like in Dubai. It's man-made weather. Yeah, it's not something that suddenly appeared. It's the dark clouds were brought there. They're called sanctions. Right? The IMF saying it's the worst whatever since the Second World War. It's for a reason. And those reasons are sanctions. And what you're seeing these days is you're still seeing a complete collapse in the euro. And you're seeing basically the ruble go from, I think the worst it got was maybe 140, something like that, against the dollar, to 58 or 55, I think it was. So what you're seeing is basically the market has an absolute fear that you're not going to have enough, whatever you want to call it, energy, oil, gas, any of that stuff coming into the winter. And the other thing people, always tell me, like, there's nuclear power and all the rest of it. And I was reading today, 40% of the fuel for EU nuclear reactors comes from two countries. One is Russia, and the other one is Kazakhstan. So you have one kind of group called OPEC Plus, who've been told that they're no longer needed and who basically control the price of oil. And going into the winter, I think they're not going to increase supply. They're not going to try and help anybody. They're going to try and help themselves. So that's why I think when this breakout comes, it's going to be larger than people expect, and it's going to be to the upside, and it has to basically scare markets. It's going to basically so that's basically how I'm positioning.
And is there, in that moment of breakout, if you like, is there a trigger? What or is this a technical trigger, or what breaks us out of this band?
It's a technical trigger. So you need basically people to start saying kind of, oh dear, we can't be shorter, we got to start buying. So I think on WTI, if it manages to get above about 113.50, that takes us to about 115. And then the big number is 116.50 on the July contract, front month contract. So I think I think it'll act as a magnet. So you manage to get this contract maybe a couple of dollars higher, and I think you're going to see massive buying, and it's all going to be panic, because they're going to see a move from 112, 111, call it, to 116.50, and nobody's going to want to be short. And then it's just going to be. And the other important thing to understand is the rest of the planet has done everything it can to stop oil prices, right? So what is the US or Europe going to do? There's no more SPR. There's no more. I mean, what are they going to say? We will, there's nothing.
We will rock you. Maybe we will lift sanctions on Venezuela and Iran. Robin, speaking of which, news over the weekend percolating through that Joe Biden is finally going to make a pilgrimage to Riyadh. And this current cycle of OPEC Plus started over 2 years ago with in essence an alignment between Washington, Moscow, and Riyadh regarding the sort of management of the oil market. Now, looking forward, with the expiry of this agreement in September, we've had the first comments from the Saudi oil minister over the weekend saying that they want to see this alliance continue. I wonder if you give us your thoughts on the outlook for that, the Americans coming back into some more alignment with Riyadh. How do you see these things playing out?
Well, look, I think Biden, of course, took a position during the election campaign and on coming into power that he was not happy with the Saudi leadership, and he's being kind of forced by the press events to climb down from that. And I think that will I think the two countries have been diverging for a while, but still there are still plenty of fundamental interests. The US as a security provider and Saudi Arabia as the key player in the oil markets and the key arbiter. And the US has even through this period of shaky diplomatic relations, of course, the US has kept looking to Saudi Arabia to see what it could do to stabilize the oil markets and put more oil on the market. So I think this fundamental reasons why the two countries drifting apart will continue, but this is a slow process, and that they're however much the Saudis think about diversifying their relationships and becoming friendly with China or Russia, whatever, they recognize deep down that those countries can't provide them with much that the US does, and the US is certainly on the security diplomatic side, it's the only game in town.
I mean, when this agreement started 2 years ago, the Americans seemed to bless the Russian-Saudi alignment on this. Do you think they can now compel a divorce there, or how do you see that triumvirate coexisting?
Well, it's more than blessing it. I mean, if you remember that in April 2020, that the OPEC Plus agreement broke down completely, and who put it back together again? It was Donald Trump. So the US can kind of hardly complain now about that cooperation, even if it was a past president's idea. And yes, look, I think the other OPEC Plus countries, and Saudi in particular, they very much see the value of having Russia in there. They've been trying to bring Russia into that kind of arrangement for a couple of decades, and having finally brought them in, they weren't about to lose them over this over the war in Ukraine. So no, I think they very much value the long-term involvement of Russia in OPEC Plus, because who knows where the oil market is going in the long term, but having one of the world's top 3 producers in there is clearly very favorable for them. And the fact that Russian production is dropping anyway, and Russian exports may drop, in a way it makes Russia less valuable, and there isn't the need to restrain them. But on the other hand, it also makes Saudi very much kind of top dog in that relationship.
Laurie, you mentioned earlier, because obviously one of the big issues there as well with any conversation between the Americans and the Saudis will be Iran and the outlook for Iran and the possibility of still salvaging the JCPOA. Your outlook for that at the earlier comments seemed to be somewhat negative. There is murmurs over the weekend that the Europeans are trying to salvage the project. Your thoughts on the outlook for that in this calendar year?
Look, again, like I still believe that this is not going to happen before November and the midterm and the outcome of the midterm. So there might be attempts, but again, I don't know. I don't see that happening. We heard that it seems that the Iranians put aside the issue of removing the Revolutionary Guard from the terrorism list, and as a sign that, okay, let's move on with this. What I'm hearing is, like, in the US, they don't want to, at least the Republicans, they don't want to hear about, like, this is the same deal, so it doesn't require a debate in the between the institutions in the US, and this is not the same deal. So I think in front of that, again, I don't see that the US would be able to pull a deal before November.
Do you think the Iranians are willing to wait around for this? I mean, they've got other things to get on with. Will they permit peace and quiet on the Arabian Peninsula if they're not getting any love and attention?
Look, if they keep on selling their oil, now they're talking about with Oman about potential projects. They're talking to many other countries about potential development of their resources. If they keep on selling, and if the US keeps on pretending not knowing what's happening, they don't care about the deal. At the end of the day, having the nuclear bomb is more important for them than anything else, because that will really put them in a stage where they are really equal to the Israelis, and they can talk to the Americans in a more powerful way than this situation. Then if they have the nuclear bomb, the US will not be easily putting sanctions on them left, right, and center, and every time that a new administration comes in, sanctioning them. So I think we are at the stage, I believe that they're more interested in the bomb. If they're really close, as they're saying, that could be their aim, so that they will really have a better leverage on all of these negotiations that are happening, because I don't see that they are getting guarantees that once these sanctions are removed today, tomorrow they will not have another president putting again the sanctions. As long as they don't have that, they would be like, so let's have the bomb and finish with it, and then the whole dynamics will change. That could be their aim. I don't know what the US thinks about that. I don't know what the Israelis think about that. But I guess
I think I'm going to be going to visit my real estate agent after I get off this podcast to put my house up for sale with that outlook, because inevitably they
won't use it.
Yeah, well, who won't use it? But it does inevitably ratchet everything up to a level that is somewhat concerning. Let's go to the survey question, because I want to get the room's view on the earlier point as to whether these markets are really paying attention, or if they're pricing in these sort of outlooks that are being presented last week, as I said, by the British Central Bank governor, and this week now by the IMF. The head of the IMF, that we're going to face our biggest test since the Second World War. I mean, that includes in our little lives memory, only a decade ago, the nearly implosion of the financial markets on the back of the credit crisis, and the Armageddon of COVID, when 20 million barrels a day of oil demand collapsed. Everything. No. This is worse. This is a bigger test than all of those things, says the head of the IMF. and she has an army of researchers, right? She's got PhD economists, in floors of them in Washington. So one presumes she's got some insights. Has the scale of this disruption been priced into the financial markets? That's the question this morning, and I welcome your insights on that. Omar, the outlook for the oil markets, ultimately, we have been through a 2-year cycle when all boats were rising, financial markets, the equity markets, as you know, as a close watcher of that space as well, they seem to have diverged now. Is that your reading of it? Can that divergence continue? You can have a declining bear market, as they call it, 20% drop in equity markets, that defines it as a bear market, and yet have oil prices crunch to the upside?
Man, absolutely. I think basically most of the again, people don't appreciate that stuff has changed. Stuff has changed big time. The US was guarantor of peace in the Middle East, blah, 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 blah. But now, after they took the Russian central bank money, the Saudis, who've been called basically a pariah state, they can be sued for 9/11, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're not going to keep their money in dollars, or at least all of it. Okay, it's not to do with any kind of political thing, but it's a difference between being stupid and being not stupid, not even smart. So the idea again that Saudi Arabia or that MBS somehow will go from no call, no meeting, no nothing, 35-year-old guy is going to meet an 80-plus guy who doesn't know what day it is and shakes hands with ghosts and somehow reach any kind of agreement, my mind boggles. And it's the same exact thing with this Iranian thing or Venezuela. The Americans have been bending over backwards. The word that they are hearing that they're not used to is no. Unless you do X, Y, remove all sanctions, IGRC, all of them, no terrorism, remove everything, guarantee it. Wait until we verify blood, then yes. Otherwise, the answer is no. And they will continue to hear no, not because of any kind of, they don't like him or political, but because they are in extremely, extremely weak position. Same to do with the oil market. The market realizes the West is basically on its knees and they will push these markets higher. The market is ripe for panic. And in the same way as people were saying, but a recession, blah, blah, blah. A recession, there's a misconception. So recession means slowing of an economy. You can't have slowing of an economy and at the same time have basically massive inflation. Or you can, and it's called like this unicorn of stagflation. But the bottom line is, the Fed is not doing anything because they can't. If inflation is at 10, 12% CPI, and if inflation into factories is at 20, 30%, what the hell does the Fed have to do in terms of we're going to raise 0.5% or not? So the whole idea is if you're sitting on money, right? If you're sitting on $100,000 and inflation is at 8%, in 5 years, your $100,000 is going to become $50,000. So what do you do with it? Spend it. Buy stocks.
Go to the beach.
Go to the beach.
And wait for Laurie's outcome to come to fruition, because then it's like, it's all worthless anyway.
No, but seriously, if you buy Apple, let's say, it might go up 10%, but you've lost 20%, but at least you've made something. So that's why I think we're not going to see this, collapse in the equity markets and all that kind of stuff.
It is interesting, that point, that despite inflation of the scale that we're talking about, a lot of the big fund managers, BlackRock and the others, are encouraging the holding of cash, which seems somewhat counterintuitive in this window. Robin, your thoughts on this baked in the markets? It's clear that, the financial markets, maybe equity markets, is a question how much they've baked in the scale of this challenge. But it does strike me that the oil markets have now baked in the fact that Ukraine war, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is kind of in the shape that it is, and that's the price point, 100 to 113 or whatever, and we're not going to see an embargo from Europe, and all that noise is now baked in. Your thoughts on that from an oil markets point of view?
Yeah, look, I think we see this divergence. I think we knew that the financial markets, some of the valuations, they were ridiculous. You know, the SPAC boom, all these tech unicorns, this kind of stuff. You know, there's a lot of this real bubble type exuberance that I think we knew couldn't last. I think the oil market is quite the opposite. I mean, look at everything that's going on, and really the only things that I can see that would be restraining the oil market on the upside are, you know, concerns about Chinese lockdowns if those return, and concerns about demand destruction and action against inflation. Because you look at otherwise at the oil market structurally just very, very tight, right? Where's the growth coming from? OPEC countries are almost maxed out. You know, we've heard some pessimism from Omar and Laurie on any deal with Iran. The US, yeah, there'll be some growth in the US, but plenty of constraints there. Shareholders are cautious. A lot of cost inflation in the shale oil patch. And what else have you got? There's very little growth coming out of other non-OPEC states. And on top of that, there's the prospect of losing a lot of Russian oil. Now, will there be a complete EU embargo? Now, that story keeps going round. There's you know, Hungary and so on having cold feet on that, or trying to protect their friends in the Kremlin. But you know, there will be a significant reduction in European imports of Russian oil one way or another over the next year. And some of that oil will not find its way to other markets, just logistically, and because of the other constraints that there'll be on sanctions, whether on shipping, insurance. You know, the Europeans will find other ways to sanction Russian oil. So when you think about one of the world's three leading producers having stricter and stricter sanctions against it, then it's structurally the oil market, it must be tipped towards just getting tighter and tighter. And I don't see what's going to save us from that, or what's going to reverse that role until there's a significant slowdown in demand.
Well, there might be it, right? At least that's what the IMF leader thinks. Laurie, we'll give you the last word this morning as the puppet master of two MPs in the Lebanese parliament. You get to have the last said. What is the survey result? Let's say no. Has this scale of disruption been priced into the financial markets yet? No is the answer. Laurie, there's been some news, some progress, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but with the concession areas in the East Med, the Lebanese concession areas, are we finally seeing some momentum towards something there?
Well, actually, what you're seeing is like there's more of collaboration between the Egyptians and the Israelis to make sure that they have enough gas going to Europe. And even like a couple of days ago, there were like some articles saying that the Minister of Energy of Israel, who had decided this year to stop any kind of developments in the oil sector, and at least for the 2022, so that she could support the injection of renewable, investment of renewables, is saying that there is a possibility, like within 18 months, Israeli gas flowing through the Egyptian LNG to Europe. And they would want to continue developing their discoveries, etc. On Lebanon side, we're still very far away. We don't even have discoveries. Total is not giving us any sign that they want to continue any kind of work. But the Lebanese government has relaunched the second licensing round beginning of year. So by 15 June, those interested should submit their bids on 8 blocks. We have 8 blocks. They can choose any block they want offshore Lebanon. So I'm not sure if they would be interested companies with the situation we are in.
Does it feel in any way that that the overarching picture vis-a-vis what's happening in Europe, clearly a European continent seeking every new possible supply of gas other than from Russia, has that created any kind of accelerated opportunity to get over some of the historical hurdles in the East Med?
In the East Med, definitely we are seeing that, and even Turkey is interested now in being part of that, if you want, that euphoria of, okay, let's use our hub, let's use our infrastructure etc. But all of that requires investments. The quickest investment today and the quickest way to get EastMed gas is through Egypt. And Turkey is a long shot. You need infrastructure. It might take 3 to 4 years. And Europe needs gas like very the soonest. So Egypt, Israel are in very good condition. Let's see what will happen to Cyprus, but definitely Lebanon is out of the picture.
And we also have, as investors, if nothing else, both the Qatar Petroleum, now Qatar Energy, and in Abu Dhabi, we have Mubadala Petroleum also moving into the EastMed opportunity. I wonder, will that capital bring that final piece to accelerate that puzzle? That's a bit of a more mid to long-term play. We're going to have to wrap it up there this morning, Monday morning, May 23rd, oil markets trading up a little over $1 on Brent, $113.67, a chunky enough price sitting at the top end of the range where it's been stuck for the last 2 months. Will it break out to the upside, as Omar's indicated, or will the outlook as projected by the head of the IMF and others that this economic clouds ahead could be the destruction on demand that Robin Mills talks about, the potential for that? Robin, thank you so much. As always, great to have your insights, and Laurie as well. Mabruk again on the success in hopefully new dawn for Lebanon, and Omar Najia, the very proud Lebanese he is. He'll be there to enjoy the new Lebanon, I'm sure. Thank you, Omar, as always, for your insights Monday morning. All the best. Have a great day, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.